Today I am fermenting some cherry tomatoes. This is my favorite way to preserve tomatoes. Okay, I also like dehydrating them and making a powder, which I then turn into tomato sauce. I really love both. But this is so easy. This is definitely the easiest way to ferment tomatoes. I use the best cherry tomatoes that I have in my garden, wash them well, and then you use a toothpick to poke a hole into each one so that the brine can infuse well through the tougher skin of the cherry tomato. But cherry tomatoes keep their consistency depending on the variety. You can grow a lot of different varieties of cherry tomatoes. I do have ones that are my favorite for making fermented cherry tomatoes. Chadwick, this is Sunrise Bumblebee. They're probably my absolute favorite. Black cherry tomatoes. I think that's all I have here. I can tell you one I don't like is Matt's cherry tomato. I really like that cherry tomato, but I don't like it for fermenting because they're too mushy. The skin isn't tough enough and they just totally turn to mush in the ferment. But these three varieties do really, really well in a long ferment. I'm going to put my hair up so that I don't get any hair in my ferment. And let me show you just how easy this is. I do want to tell you that I only use Redmond salt because this salt is not iodized and it also is loaded with minerals. They do not strip it of minerals like other salt brands do. They leave the minerals in it just as it is mined from the ground. And you're adding more than 60 trace minerals to your ferment because you choose to use this salt. But you're also not adding iodine, which is so important because iodine will keep the ferment. They will prevent the ferment from happening. So never use an iodized salt. Okay, you need 2 cups. I already made 2 cups worth of brine and quickly realized, well, this isn't going to be enough. So I'm going to add to this. This is 2 cups of water, filtered water, and 1.5 tablespoons of Redmond salt. Now I'm going to add 2 more cups of water. And 1.5 tablespoons of salt. If you're going to err on the side of too much instead of not enough. The salt's, of course, really important to preserve your tomatoes. Mix that in. And look how gorgeous it is. It's pink because the minerals, all those trace minerals in there, are affecting the color of the salt. It's actually a pink salt. And the brine's so pretty. Okay, so there you go. That is mixed. When I first fermented food, I thought maybe I had to heat the water to make sure the salt was dissolved really well. I don't know what I was thinking. You don't have to do that. You do want to use filtered water, but it can be cold water. Add your salt in. And now with this brine, because I'm using Redmond's, anything that's left on the bottom is the actual minerals. The salt has dissolved into the water. Okay. I'm going to poke each tomato and add them into my brine. Oh, I also have, for flavoring, I have a couple basil leaves that I just picked from my back deck and washed them off. And I have some garlic cloves. There's other things you could add. Check out the link in the description for the full details and other options of what you can add for flavoring. Okay, get these in. Now this is not going to fill my jar, but I have more tomatoes coming in the garden, so I can actually add tomorrow. I can add more tomatoes to this ferment. So I'm leaving plenty of brine in there so I can add to it tomorrow. And it will probably be, day 3 is when this will be done. And to know it's done, I simply taste it. If it tastes the way I want it to taste, then we call it good. Then you'll simply take your weight off, put a regular lid on it that doesn't have the fermenting holes, and put it in the fridge. That's the only negative thing with fermented food is that I do often keep it in the fridge. But I should say, cherry tomatoes do really well in a cool, dark place. I have kept a whole gallon, 2 half-gallon jars of fermented tomatoes last winter in our root cellar, and they were just as good in August of the following summer as they were when I put them down there the previous October. So they kept very well as long as it's a cool and dark place. But if you don't have that kind of a situation, then you do want to keep it in the fridge. So that's the only negative, is it does take up fridge space. Okay, so this lid is the special lid that comes with my ferment kit, and it has these holes in it, but on the top, it has this little cover that's keeping any kind of a bug from getting in there, but letting all of the good bacteria of the air get into my ferment. And then instead of a weight, or as a weight, they use a spring, which I really love because as this jar gets more full, the spring will allow room for more food in there. So put this on. And they did do it, okay, depending on what you're fermenting and the size of it, sometimes your food will come up the side of the spring. Super easy to solve. I'm going to use a lettuce leaf to keep the vegetables under the brine and then put my spring on top. Add my lid, and I'm going to let this sit on the counter for 2 to 3 days, and then I will taste it. Okay, these tomatoes are now going to go in the refrigerator. They have been sitting on the counter for 5 days, 4.5 days. The taste is perfect, and that's really the way I decide when the fermentation is done, when the taste is the way you want it. It's that simple, guys. Just taste them every day after day 3-ish, and when it tastes the way you want it, they're ready to go in the fridge. The fermentation still occurs in the refrigerator, but it slows down to almost stopping. And I have kept them in the fridge, like I said, for up to a year. So all I need to do at this stage is take the weight out and change my lid to a regular lid, and then they go into the cold. I did add a couple more cherry tomatoes after the day that I started this. On day 2, I had some more from the garden, but it was just not even a handful. I think it was like 4 tomatoes. So I had originally used an iceberg lettuce leaf, and it had gone really flimsy when I went to add more tomatoes. So I grabbed a leaf of kale from the garden and used that instead. If I had this jar all the way full with my cherry tomatoes, then this spring would have worked beautifully to hold them all in place. But because there was so much wiggle room, I used a jar too big. I didn't have enough tomatoes. The spring alone wasn't keeping them all under the brine, but once I added the piece of kale, that did the job. All right, let's get these in the fridge. You might have noticed the brine gets cloudy. It gets a little more cloudy with each passing day. Let me get a spoon. I'm going to take out the items that I had used for flavor, the garlic and the basil, and throw those away. Actually, I'm going to compost those. And the kale leaf is going to go, probably, you know what, I'm going to feed this to the chickens. The chickens will love this. And my piece of basil. I think I had a couple basil leaves. Where's the other one? Down there. You can leave these if you want. I just don't want to have the taste change too much and get too powerful. Here we go. It's almost there. Did I get all the garlic? I think so. All right, it's that simple. Now I do have more tomatoes still in my garden, so I will do this process all over again. Can you reuse the brine? Yes, but it's already gone through all those stages of fermentation, and I would rather have a whole new batch starting fresh with my new tomatoes. And it's only a little bit of salt and water, so I will remake my brine. I'll do the whole process again with some more tomatoes and then combine them all in the fridge. So this goes in the fridge just like this. And when I do another batch, I will take those tomatoes out of that jar and add them to this brine in my refrigerator after they've fermented. So it's that simple. What do they taste like? They are a salty, slightly tangy version of cherry tomatoes. And the texture is just slightly mushier than you would have on a fresh cherry tomato because, of course, it's been soaking all this time. But it's a really delicious flavor. And it's my favorite thing to ferment, I think. Hope you try it. Let me know what you think. Also, if I were you, I'd want to know. I love these ferment kits. I love the spring because if you have a lot of things in your jar, like if I'm doing peppers work really well with the spring. I don't want to squish so many cherry tomatoes in my jar that my spring actually is pushed down, because I just don't want to get them all squished, but peppers are a harder texture. And I love that I can add more peppers to my jar. They can squeeze in there, and this is going to be just the right size for what I need. And I really love the lid that keeps any bugs out, because bugs would love to get into your ferment, but that solves the problem. And then once they go into my fridge, I use a lid that has a really strong seal, and it's a stainless steel lid, so it's not going to rust or corrode. I love all of these products, and I will link to them in the description if you're interested in knowing more.